again. Really nice to speak to you again. I know we've had many conversations before about the illness and the experience that you've been through with benzodiazepines. But I note that now your film Toxic, that you've been working on for quite a while, as not only the main subject matter of a documentary about your own experience and your own journey with benzodiazepine dependency, but also sort of going further than that. I guess you've been kind of like taking a deeper dive into, our pharmaceutical industry and, how our medical system is set up at the moment and where there might be some failings in that. So I just wondered if you might start by explaining a little bit about your journey. Maybe from the offset, we should kind of talk a little bit about what benzodiazepines are, because I think that's probably important for people to understand from the off. So I'll let you just explain a little bit about your journey, but I'm really excited to see that your film that you've been working on for so long is like almost out and can't wait to see it. And yeah, congratulations on getting it this far.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks, Charlie, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and be chatting. Obviously, we have a lot of crossovers with our work and our sort of missions and values, and it's a real pleasure to be able to talk about things that matter to us. So, yeah, so to kick off with, what are benzodiazepines? In the very simplest form, they are anti-anxiety medications. So they are generally prescribed for, I think it's mostly anxiety and insomnia. But they have been known to be given out for kind of random reasons, and things like ADHD as well. So it's quite a spectrum of reasons for why they're given out. They are given out pretty much in every industrialized country worldwide, and they may commonly be known as your likes of Xanax and your Valium, although there's a whole family of benzodiazepines around the world.
And do they differ from antidepressants, or is that all in the same pot?
They do differ, yeah, different class of drugs. But what usually happens is there is this sort of build up of prescriptions, if you like, of people being given an antidepressant and then an anti-anxiety medication, or vice versa. And sadly, what often happens is people experience the consequences of one and are given the other one to buffer that. But of course, it's kind of adding on to the potential risks.
Yeah, so explain to me a little bit then about your journey with this benzodiazepine dependency on these pharmaceuticals, because I know that quite a long time ago you had an issue with the virus, if I'm understanding that correctly. And as a result, they put you on these benzodiazepines to kind of help you heal. But not only did it kind of make your health situation worse, but then kind of led you down a dark path, basically, of trying to dig yourself out of a bit of a hole of dependency, if I've explained that correctly. But yeah, please do tell us a bit about your journey. Because I find it fascinating that, as you say, I think on your website, and I've said many times, we go to doctors really to be healed or to at least be helped. And I think what stands out to me most about your journey is that you've been back to medical professionals quite a number of times asking to be taken off these drugs, and I don't know if there was a flat out refusal or whether there was a discouragement, but maybe you can tell us a bit about your journey and your relationship really with the doctors along the way.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for using the term dependency, because there is this massive misconception around, or people get addicted to these drugs and they're highly addictive, which they can be, but actually there is the figure online from an organization called Benzo Information Coalition, who are run by medical professionals who really understand this issue, and very professional setup. And it's found that actually 0.2% of people injured by benzodiazepines, prescribed benzodiazepines, come under the term addiction. And the rest, there's this dependency term. My personal view is that even the word dependency may not be fully accurate, because there's this sense of, they need more of it still. But what can happen is this experience of tolerance withdrawal. So there's a well-known psychiatrist that's got his own YouTube channel, Dr. Joseph Wittering, and he explained to me on an interview, actually, when we had a call together, that the injuries already started taking place to the brain and nervous system whilst you're on this prescription. And so I know in my experience that already happened. I never craved, air quotes, craved the drug. And that even if you were kept on it, your body's already been harmed by it. So you're in this lose-lose situation. You come off it, you go through this horrific withdrawal, which is an understatement. Brain injury, neuro injury is the more accurate description. And not for everybody, but for those that do get severely harmed, this is what's happening. Or you stay on them, but just go further into the well of it's just harming you more and more. There is no good endpoint from that. So I think there's this massive misconception around what's actually happening with these prescription meds. So my experience was that, as you rightfully said, I had a virus when I was doing a PGC down at Southampton Uni back in 2012, I think. Interestingly, and maybe we can swing back around to this later in the conversation, I believe that my lungs were already somewhat sensitized because when I was 19, sorry, my partner's dog has just run off, in case you hear that in the background. And when I was 18, 19, I lived on a small sailing boat when I was a student. So I bought this small sailing boat and just fancied a bit of an adventure, but it flooded a couple of times. And I think this caused a mold problem in the boat. And of course you sort it out as best you can and you air it, but I didn't really realize the risks, nor did I have the experience to really know how to fully deal with a mold issue. And I think that began sensitizing my lungs. And then the virus in 2012 was sort of the straw on the camel's back. This is my opinion. And I basically just started to feel like I couldn't breathe properly. And so the entirety of my PGCE, I had that feeling. I was obviously going to the doctors and being met with that sort of dismissive, we've met you for 10 minutes and therefore we know what's happening attitude. And they were telling me it's just the stress of teaching and there's nothing physically wrong with you. So I was just kind of in a position where I was just forced to keep working, and I would go into the stationery cupboards in between teaching classes and I would cry because I literally felt like I couldn't breathe and no one was believing me. And I mean, the year before I'd been playing football for Fulham Reserves, and back then I even knew I had to stop playing, one, because I felt like I needed to go and get some security in life, and two, because I felt like there was something going on with my lungs. So anyway, fast forward to completing the PGC, which is about a year. I then moved to France with my ex-partner who's French, and I'd always loved France from being a kid. So I went there and I thought, well, if it's just stress, then obviously the south of France is probably a good antidote to that. And basically within, I think it was after 3 months of being there, still felt like I couldn't breathe properly, still struggling to work. I was working in a nursery school at the time, so very high energy needed, and I, just couldn't breathe properly. And 3 months into that, the doctors said, you've got 60% lung capacity and a kind of asthma as a result of this virus. So he gave me medicine for that, but one of the big consequences of not being able to breathe properly for a year, and as he explained it, the lack of oxygen in your bloodstream means that you've had severe anxiety as well, as off the back of that. So I was given the anti-anxiety medication after I had quite a severe panic attack whilst I was on holiday with my family. And the doctor literally said, if you want your life back, take these. And he gave me the prescription. I've since found out that that's actually on the marketing material for Xanax like 50 years ago. Like that was part of the training and marketing propaganda, dare I say. And within, I can't remember the exact time frame, but quite soon after going on it, I asked to come off it. Intuitively knew something was wrong. I felt drowsy. It didn't feel right. And the French doctors refused to take me off it. Instead, they increased the dosage instead. And I think it was just that classic frog in boiling water analogy, where the more I was being given of it, the less of my own capacity and understanding to listen to my own intuition that I had. And it got to the point where I was on it for 4 years and I started having all kinds of new symptoms, tachycardia, this hyperglycemic symptom. I became very apathetic. I don't think I was a good partner at the time. I just kind of lost my sense of self in everything, including my work, my personal life, everything. And it got to the point in 2016 where I knew that enough was enough, because I was getting more of these tachycardic episodes. So I came back to the UK, and that's when I found out I should have been given it for 1 week maximum because of the risks involved.
Wow.
And then that started the whole next chapter of being housebound for half a decade.
Wow, that's insane. And what was their argument for kind of upping your dose after you felt that you wanted to be taken off it?
I wish I could remember that accurately, and I'm in the process now of hopefully in the next few months going back to France to actually get my medical records. But it's not easy because you have to go back to each individual hospital, clinic, doctor's appointment, pharmacy to actually get get the details of every appointment that you had. So from what I can remember, it was along the lines of, you just need this. You're just someone who needs anti-anxiety medication. And of course, the irony was that I was probably displaying signs of anxiety, maybe even depression, because one, I just had this trauma of not being able to breathe properly for a year, and two, was taking this very, very highly dangerous pill that was creating new consequences as well. So it just became this vicious cycle. I do remember there was one hospital appointment I went to, and I was physically shaking, probably because at this point my nervous system had already been injured. And I remember him saying in the most patronizing way, "You're clearly just somebody that needs to be on this medication for life." And, like, he's seen me for 2 minutes in my worst moment, when I'm injured, when I'm scared. And so I think it was just part of this culture of doctors sharing notes with each other and just deciding who you are, what sort of person you are, and therefore whether you should be on this medication or not.
Yeah, I can really resonate with how you must feel with all the frustration of like the medical profession not actually listening to you. I mean, I've had my similar experience, not to the same degree as you, but when I was consulting people for all the autoimmune issues I was having, which I didn't actually realize at the time was autoimmune. I was just feeling really, really crap the entire time. And you go back to the doctor, and they I can literally see their eyes rolling in their head going, "Oh, it's not you again." And I'm a bit like, dude, do you think I'd be wasting my time basically coming back and forward if I didn't feel awful? And then I remember one laughing at me because I dared to suggest that actually the food I was eating might make a difference, and so maybe I should check myself for kind of allergies or something like that. But yeah, as you say, it was just, I was totally dismissed, basically, any suggestions that I had about my own health, and obviously because we know our health best, we know our bodies best, we know how we feel. So yeah, the fact that you wouldn't take that on board or listen to your own complaints and your own intuition about your own health is kind of ridiculous. So what's your feelings now towards the medical profession? Did you get more help that you needed in England, or were you coming up against more obstacles there?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for sharing that as well, because it is sadly a really common thing that I'm finding more and more, as I'm sure it is for you as well, the more people that you talk to. And it is men and women. From what I have experienced myself, I do think there is misogyny in the medical system as well. And there's a bias towards certain communities, and just on every level there's a judgment that's going on, and not just with the medical industry, we see it everywhere, the legal system, etc. Yeah, so even after that was just kind of the start of the next level of hell. And the continued medical negligence just kind of kept propelling from 1 month and 1 year to the next. And yeah, just very dismissive. I remember calling 111, for anyone who's international, that's kind of our non-emergency helpline in the UK, and they laughed at me. They told me to stop calling. We've done your blood test, there's nothing wrong with you. And just even looking back through some of my notes in the UK, it just kind of horrifies me to see what they've written. Oh, she clearly just displays a anxious temperament or something, and clearly is just very stressed at the moment. And I've suggested she takes more of her medicine. It's just so patronizing and so ignorant. And so yeah, that went on for 2 years. I moved to, I was living in London at the time. I'd lived on the Isle of Wight, I'd lived in Bournemouth, I'd lived in Somerset, I'd lived in Coventry, and every single area that I went to, I would say 95 to 99% of the medical professionals, in terms of GPs and hospital staff, were incredibly patronizing and not willing to get to the heart of the issue. So yeah, I lost a lot of trust and faith in the medical system. I will say the paramedics, 90% of the paramedics that I met were brilliant and just really reassuring. And it was actually the 35th paramedic crew that I had, which was after 2 years since I stopped the benzo. They were the ones that sat down with me for 2.5 hours, maybe more, to go through everything. And they were the ones that said, we think it's this medication you're on in France. We've actually seen that in other people around Somerset, which kind of blew my mind. So there are good doctors out there. There are great medical staff out there. But my personal experience, and having talked to a lot of people about this over the years, is that unfortunately it seems to be the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, for sure. And I find that obviously when you're not feeling very well at all, it's really difficult to maintain the fight for answers yourself. I mean, I found that with my own illness, basically. You know, you've got to be your own doctor and you're out there trying to find solutions and trying to find answers from the people that are so-called experts, but they're actually making you more ill. I remember when I started to be a holistic health coach, and I remember one of the lecturers saying that the second most popular disease to die from, I think it was in the UK and the US at that time, was iatrogenic disease. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, what's this crazy disease that I've never heard of that's like a massive killer? And when we were given the definition, it was basically people dying at the hand of pharmaceuticals, medications, or medical treatments. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, that is absolutely incredible that nobody really ever hears of that. And yet it's above, at the time it was above like cardiac problems as a biggest killer. And yet we don't really seem to be showing too much awareness around it. So it's great that you're really delving into that, because it does worry me, the kind of passive approach that we seem to be having to pharmaceuticals. You know, you kind of go to the doctor, literally the first thing he says to you before you've even said what's wrong with you is, oh yeah, you need antidepressants, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? There's always a drug at the end of it. And, you know, I get that they might be, you know, they're pushed for time and pushed for resources and everything, but we really need to change the way that we're addressing illness, basically, and be a bit more preemptive rather than just offer a drug as a solution for everything. So I was going to go back to, if you don't mind, you mentioned that after you came back from France, you were housebound for 5 years. At what point did you realise, okay, I need to come off these drugs, and how hard was that?
So it was when I first came back to the UK, so it was 2016, I think it was October 2016, and I went to see a GP on the Isle of Wight, and she was the one that said, you should have been on these for a week maximum. So immediately I was like, shit, I've been on this for 4 years, like, what do I do with that information? And she said to me, we can give you Valium, which is a sister version of the drug, to taper off. And I was like, I don't know who to trust at this point. And I was so stressed because I'd just given up my life in France that I spent 4 years building, working really hard for, and also had the effects of these pills in my system for 4 years as well, and just being told this news. And it was just so all-consuming. I just didn't know what to do, who to trust, where to go. And so I felt like the safest thing was just, well, she's suggesting I taper off it because it's probably really uncomfortable to just come off it. But I thought, screw discomfort, I'm going to prioritize my safety. And I've said this numerous times, but it's the way my brain worked. I remembered the film Requiem for a Dream, watching it when I was a teenager in the cinema, and I was like, I'm going to have to go through that. Like, I don't want to do recreational drugs. Like, I made that decision when I was younger, but I'm probably going to have to go through something like this, but at least I'll get my freedom back and I'll be safe once I'm the other side of it. So I thought I might have a few weeks or a few months of hell. And And in addition to that, the drug that I was on in France is so apparently dangerous, it's not prescribed in the UK or US. So I couldn't even get any more prescription of that in the UK anyway. So it was like, do I go on a different pill and take the risk with that, or do I come off it and just bear the brunt of the effects? And so I chose the latter because nobody had said to me, you might die if you stop taking this drug. No one said that because I didn't have a death wish, so I just wouldn't have done it. And so yeah, I came off it, and then kind of the hell did pan out as I thought it would, like Requiem for a Dream. But I obviously did not ever envision that it would be the 5 years so I was housebound because I came off it, because I cold turkeyed. But I didn't know until 2019, as I say, with the 35th ambulance crew. I didn't know until then that that's the reason why, because despite the fact that I come off it, and despite the fact that a few months later my body went into this shutdown, whenever I asked a doctor, could it be because of that pill that I was on, they said, no, you would have had a withdrawal period of a few weeks maximum. So they thought it was vitamin D deficiency, stress, depression, anxiety. I'd been told that I had ME several years before, and I'd find out 7 years later that I didn't have ME. Just all these, it was so muddied to try and get the full answer. And meanwhile, yeah, my life just fell by the wayside for that time.
Man, or meanwhile, having absolutely no help to guide you through the detox process or anything. So how long did you, and what effect was this having on your day-to-day life? I mean, presumably you couldn't work very well, if at all.
Yeah, so I initially unfortunately I was put under pressure to go and get a full-time job. So I had to go do that. So I ended up moving to London, and I got a full-time job in a primary school in southeast London, which just happened to be the naughtiest class in the school that I was given, and I was just thrown in at the deep end. And it was, I think, was it 6 weeks into that the injury hit, which I only found out last year actually from Dr. Josef Wittdoering, that it can happen that way, whereby you stop the medication and there's a delayed period of effect and consequence on the body. So I was doing this full-time teaching job that was teaching is very demanding anyway, so it's demanding on your nervous system. You're drinking caffeine, you're eating sugar, you're staying up late, you're not really resting at the weekends. So that probably didn't help at all. And there was just one day where my heart rate was racing like hell. I went into my school. They refused to call an ambulance because they didn't want to scare the parents. So I had to walk back home, which thankfully wasn't too far, call an ambulance. And when they came, my heart was at 180 BPM, and they took me straight to hospital. But in the ambulance on the way there, my heart had calmed down naturally. I thought, well, at least I'm going to get the answer now. I'm going to go into hospital. They're going to do all the tests, and I'm going to know what's happening and sort it out. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I was just sent home none the wiser. Nothing showed up on tests, and that was a pattern that repeated. So I couldn't work. Lost my job, lost my rental home, lost my independence. I just went from pillar to post with different family members at that point, and had no clue what had happened, why it was happening, and that's the way it was until I started to get the answers in 2019.
Amazing. And what was the turning point then that led you to kind of start on a different track? Did you suddenly meet like a different consultant or doctor, or was it just a piece of luck?
Well, as I say, it was this paramedic crew. It was these two paramedics, Jenna and Joe, and they were brilliant. And then I went to the GP straight after having that chat with the paramedics, and met a really great GP who is incredibly empathetic, and she said to me, we've poisoned you, but there's nothing we can do about it. And she actually asked me to come in on another occasion and tell her everything that I knew about benzodiazepines and the risks. And then unfortunately she retired, so sort of back to square one with doctors. So I kind of, at first I was a bit dubious because for 2 years I'd gone under been tested for almost everything under the sun.
Mm.
So I was a little bit skeptical, but it did sink in when I started sort of social media hashtagging benzodiazepines, benzo withdrawal, and I saw what was going on. I was like, this is it. This is it. I fit every other story just connects with mine. And so from there, it was this bittersweet thing of I've got the validation, I've got the answer, but also still not getting support. There's no cure. And although time, obviously we can go back to this, but time is the biggest healer. And also finding out that literally hundreds of millions of people are on this medication and an unknown number are being harmed as well. So it was a real sort of, where do you go from here? What do you do with that information and how do you start rebuilding? So yeah, that was 2019 and just starting to take one step at a time towards healing and trying to rebuild my life from there.
God, poor you. I mean, it seems to me that the opioid, I can't even say that word, opioid crisis is quite, talked about quite a lot in the media, but you don't really hear that much about benzodiazepine dependence. I can't even say the drug names. I'm sure they kind of make them so long just so so you can't say them. But why do you think there's so much media around the opioid crisis and nothing really that much said about the benzodiazepines? Because it seems to me that you don't really read about it that much, and that's obviously what you're trying to bring awareness to in your documentary Toxic. But I don't know. I wonder why that there is a discrepancy there.
It's a really good question. I don't know. That's actually something that I'd love to explore. The benzo crisis is being termed or questioned. Is it the next opioid crisis? And I think all of us that are sort of seen what's happening have all agreed that it is. When you see the scale and the system and the business model and the societal model that's at play, I don't think you can say that it's not. As to why benzos haven't got as much attention, I'm not really sure. I don't know if people are fatigued from hearing about the opioid crisis, that they just go, oh, well, a bit like the other horrific things that are going on in the world, another war, another this, another that. Do people become desensitized to it? The fact that it's so common, I think people are afraid of a truth that can be very scary. And, the monetary component as well, it's big business. So I think somewhere in amongst all of that is possibly some sort of answer, but I think there's enough people that are talking about this and enough people that are unfortunately harmed and will continue to be harmed that the truth at some point will eventually, hopefully, break the dam and it will have the same sort of general public understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Do you think that looking back, do you think they could have given you more alternative therapies or alternative means, more natural kind of ways to heal from your initial kind of issues with your lungs? Because presumably as you've tried to heal yourself off of these drugs, you might have looked at other kind of like healing modalities. Have you found anything that's particularly helped you?
So yeah, 100%. It blows my mind that these pills are being given out as the first port of call, not the last. So I think that is a massive issue with the system. And yeah, it's hard to even know where to start with that because it's just so wrong, to put it bluntly, as I'm sure you've seen yourself. So yeah, I think they quite literally could have been hundreds of things that could have been suggested and put on the table first. I do also think that we have a societal problem with the quick fix mentality. And that's not to put any responsibility on the patient, but something that I think we all have to be mindful of as well, is this hunger to just get back in the rat race, get back to work, show up, look like we're doing well. And actually, it can be really hard to say, I need to prioritize my health. I need to do this thing that might take longer or might mean me looking at the microscope of, looking at my life under the microscope and going, what is working, what isn't working? Do I need to slow down more? Do I need to go in a different direction? Am I happy with my career? Am I happy with my choices? But we're not taught about that. We're just taught very black and white, success, failure. And then if you're presented with this solution, even if you've got great doctors that say, actually, should we go down this route first? It can be hard to maybe see that that is the best route if you feel like your entire sense of well-being and financial security and everything else is wrapped up in you being able to just feel normal again and get back to doing what you were doing. So, yeah, I think there are so many things that could help. Everything from what I've just said, sort of really addressing lifestyle choices. I think ultimately lifestyle and happiness is kind of the core thing. Because if we don't feel those things on a subconscious level, then we do start getting anxious. We do start getting frustrated. Obviously, external things can happen as well, like a virus and an illness that can compound the situation. But I think for me, in that moment, what I probably needed was rest. I probably just needed a break and a long holiday, or even just going to France, but taking on part-time work and just chilling out for 6 months. But hindsight's 2020. And then there are all these other things around, as you say, nutrition, exercise, and more holistic approaches. I will say that with the virus, because of the impact on my lungs, I think I did need that medication because my lung capacity went from 60% to as high as close to 100% as it could get. So I've always sort of said I felt like I had one pill that was saving my life and another one that was jeopardizing it. So it is a balance, but ultimately for things like anxiety, depression, insomnia, I always think everything else has to be put on the table first before these pills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a real believer in taking a holistic approach and looking at not only diet and exercise, but as you say, kind of external kind of influences in your life, your relationships, your work situation, but also environment. Because as you say, I think a lot of the time we end up in these situations and having these illnesses because we're taking the shortcut. It's very easy to hold out your hand and get a pill and go, oh, that's me done. But then it tends to be like a game of whack-a-mole, because 2 weeks later you'll get another, thing crop up as a result of the medication you're taking, for example. And quite often you're sent to a different specialist who hasn't seen the original problem. And then, as you say, it's just like compounding amounts of medication that just seem to be coming from different angles that really concerns me. Because I think there's been there's been a lot of kind of high profile deaths and celebrity deaths around the kind of mix of pharmaceuticals. I'm thinking of people like Michael Jackson. I mean, I can't remember exactly what happened in his case, but there's definitely a lot of kind of high profile celebrities that we never really got to the root of the whole kind of cocktail of different prescription drugs that they were on. So it's beyond me why we're not paying closer attention to that right now. But I know that you're a musician, and so I wondered if music was played a part in your healing and your recovery at all. And also I was particularly thinking about your lungs and wondered if you'd sort of attempted any breath work and whether that had helped with your lung capacity.
Yeah, so the short answer to the music side of it is, yeah, absolutely. Music was a huge part. Always has been in my life. It's always been something that's been my biggest dream, to be honest. And I think just even in my early years as a kid, being able to put music on my headphones kind of drowned out a lot of what was going on externally, and helped me cope with certain things then. And I think I just always had hope through music and the way it can change your state and your even your sort of energetic levels and energy levels rather, and frame of mind. Like, it's such a powerful healer, and we don't give it enough credit. It's just thrown on as an add-on in the education system as like a nice thing to be able to do, but it's so vital. And yeah, when I was in France, I set up a couple of bands, and that was a big part of healing from the initial lung capacity injury. And then again, when, those years sort of being housebound, just being able to listen to music at times. And then I started songwriting again in those years, became really significant parts of this, and are now part of the film going forward as well. Um, and in terms of breath work, so yes, I mean this is such a great example of a holistic treatment before any medications. I didn't know about it until recent years, and I did do an online class for a while, and yeah, it was brilliant. It really helped me. It was once a week, but I could feel the difference if I had a tachycardic attack, which is where the heart goes really fast. Um, Even when you're resting, I could feel that I was able to control that a bit more, and relax more easily because I was doing those breathwork classes. So it's actually on my list of things to do in 2025 is get back to that. And I think between breathwork and singing is so
Oh,
cathartic. And I really don't think I'm a particularly great singer, but I love singing, and I love writing music, and I love performing music. And I think there's sort of this spiritual sort of soul level elements to that, but then there's also um, I think it can ground you, and it can kind of rebalance your everything inside, your emotions, and especially if you're recovering from a lung injury, or you've been through something like COVID or other
mm.
coronaviruses. Like, I actually think that's a really important part of healing. So um, the last thing I'll say about music as well is, aside from just actually enjoying it and playing it, there have been times when I've been in a real panicked state because of the the neuro injury, and I can put on a relaxing piece of music on YouTube or something, um, and spa music, or trying to think of specific types, but they're out there, like healing forms of music, and it is amazing, like vagus nerve healing and things like that. It's amazing how almost immediately that can change your state. So I think music as a whole is so underrated in the healing powers that it has.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I haven't explored it enough actually, but I'm starting to explore a bit, music on different frequencies and how that can heal different parts of the body. Yeah, it's a fascinating area that I would really like to get like deep further into myself. But coming back to the film just briefly, because I want to make sure that we talk about that. Obviously, you felt it important to raise awareness around bio. I can't even say benzo. Let's just say benzo. The word's so long. I'm like, oh my god, I can't say it. Around awareness around benzo dependency, basically, and you wanted to kind of portray your own journey within that, and how important it is that people wake up to basically considering more the drugs and the pharmaceuticals that they're taking, not only the patients but also the doctors, hopefully. So in your research for the film, what would you say was the most eye-opening discovery, first of all?
Ooh, that is a good question. And I will say that we're still, and when I say we, it's myself and Lara, who's a volunteer assistant on the film at the moment. So we're still very much in early stages, and the aim is to get the next round of funding in, so we can go into a full sort of professional research stage, and have a small office, and be able to go and collate all the information that's required to do this film justice. But at this point, I mean, so much. Off the top of my head, the scale of the issue is one. So pre-COVID, over 100 million people in the States alone were on a benzo, which equates to about 1 in 4 people, over 1 in 4 people. That was pre-COVID, and we know this is an exponentially increasing issue. Another thing was an interview with another doctor who told me that, I can't remember the specific figure, but basically almost everyone that's taking these pills is experiencing some sort of reduced cognition, to the point where this is a public health risk as well.
Mm.
Because if you've got this many people on psychiatric meds, and they're driving, and there are train drivers, and there are pilots, and there are surgeons, what is the consequence of that? And how many disasters have we seen in the world were actually influenced by this issue that we know nothing about? So I think that just kind of blew my mind. The environmental toxicity. So this is another part of the film that I want to explore. My background's actually in environmental science. This was kind of a natural area of interest anyway. But these aren't being monitored in the consequences that they're having on our environment. There are very limited studies out there already, but some of them are actually showing that they are changing behavior in fish species. And the effects of that on the ecosystem, we don't know. We're, just another way that we as humans collectively are playing with fire. And again, when you look at the scale of this, you consider how many pills are ending up in our environment, yet we're not monitoring them. And then we're sort of scratching our heads going, why are major diseases on the rise continuously? And I can't say with certainty whether this is a factor, but the fact that we can't say that it's not a possibility, and the fact that it's not being looked into on the scale that needs to be is another mind-blowing element of this. They are actually being found in certain amounts in our food and water systems because our treatment systems aren't robust enough to actually remove those completely.
Yeah, so just to clarify on that point there, essentially, we're all peeing out all the pharmaceuticals that we're taking, basically, and that's just going straight into our water supply, and our treatment facilities aren't adequate enough, basically, to filter all that out. So essentially, if we're drinking the tap water, we're all drinking somebody else's pharmaceuticals. I think I read a report recently that was looking at not only how, the sex in fish were changing because of this, because also, I think, if we're talking about the contraceptive pill, for example, I think 1.2 million women in the UK are on the contraceptive pill. And that means you're peeing out high levels of hormones, basically, the entire time. That, I don't know why I'm laughing, because there's nothing funny about it, but it's basically changing, changing sexes of fish. So, and that's just fish. That's before we do any research into what effect that's having on us as humans. So, yeah, I mean, I think the environmental, and not to mention the kind of waste of the amount of kind of like these plastic films that drugs come in, or the plastic bottles that drugs come in the entire time. So yeah, you're right. It's having effect not only on us as humans, but also in the environment at large. And yeah, no one's talking about it. It's mad.
Yeah, and actually somebody came to me and pointed out a few months ago that another aspect of the environmental side of it, very sadly and very tragically, are the cemeteries as well. We're not understanding how, when people sadly pass away, if they have pharmaceuticals in their systems, that this is also ending up in our environment on a massive scale.
Wow, I never
Yeah,
even considered that.
me neither.
Something else that we need to worry about. Great.
Yeah.
Um,
And just
so
to answer the question, I think that's why this is such a tricky thing, because it's so big and it's so overwhelming and it's so scary and it's so kind of like, well, what the hell do we do about this? That it is easier to just go, you know what, I'm gonna switch that off. Let me watch a cat video, because it's not easy.
no, it isn't. However, I mean, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I'm on benzodiazepines, or I'm on some other kind of pharmaceutical that's I've been on kind of long term, and I'm thinking that it might be having an effect on me that is not desirable, what would you say to them in terms of what would you suggest their next course of action be if they're concerned about it?
Yeah, so first of all, don't take any drastic actions. Do not stop the medication abruptly. That's the most dangerous thing that you can do. You can die from these medications. And that is not something that I was told about, and very few people. There's a manager of one of the very few, if not the only one of two clinics in the UK that deals with this kind of harm. And she was telling me that it's about 1% of the people that she works with were told that you could die if you come off them, basically. So don't stop them, don't panic, but go and find the spectrum of research that you need to build your own informed consent in place of not having it given by the doctors. So by that I mean, look at trusted sources like Benzo Information Coalition, check out channels such as Dr. Joseph Witt-Doering's page, and I keep meaning to build our links page on our website where we can signpost. But yeah, just Googling these pages. I think we've got links on our Instagram page potentially, are really important. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I would actually advocate for looking on the forums online as well. There are Facebook forums. There's something called Benzo Buddies. And there you can get a real understanding of what's happening. Now, obviously, it's not easy to see that. Some of the stories are very severe, but in my opinion, it's better to have the full spectrum of possibilities of what is happening and listening to people that have been through this experience, listening to trusted sources, and then deciding how to move forward. Maybe printing that information off, taking it to your GP and saying, what do we do with this? You want to try and build as big a picture as you can of the real truth of it. And if you feel that something is off and your doctor's not listening, find another one who is, because it's unfortunately my experience has been that a lot of them don't listen or they don't have time. But that's not good enough. You can't just say, sorry, we don't have time, therefore we can't help you heal, and we're not going to put measures into place to save your life. So you kind of have to, like you said earlier, sort of be your own doctor. If you've got people around you that can help with that, family, friends, community workers, get all the help you can to try and put together the puzzle piece, and then have the best information to make your next step.
Yeah, great. I actually think that health coaches play a really important role when it comes to this kind of thing, because they're like a go-between, essentially, sometimes between the doctor and you. And I think when you're not feeling very well, as I said before, it's really important to have someone on your team that's taking account of whoever you're talking to, whatever you're taking, whatever therapy you're doing to try and heal, to keep you on track. Because sometimes it's really difficult to remember, what you've done, whether it had an improvement or not, what this drug did. We've got so much cocktail of drugs coming into it, it's really impossible to keep an eye on what's causing what symptom. But yeah, that's really good guidance. Thank you. And I wondered, when you came off finally, how long have you been off the benzodiazepines now?
So I cold turkeyed in 2016. I was given an antidepressant when they didn't know it was benzodiazepine injury, because they thought I had oversensitive nervous system. So I was given one pill of that, but that was enough to cause a new symptom, which was akathisia, which is shaking of the muscles. So I came off in 2016, but it was slightly compounded by that. So yeah, it's been almost, this will be my ninth year.
And have they suggested anything to you, or have you found any interesting recommendations around other therapies, like, I don't know, to rebuild the damage to the neurological system or the nervous system? Or is it just a case of as long as the drugs are out of your system for a certain amount of time, your body can rebalance?
It's a bit of both. So this is why it's so important not to cold turkey and to taper off in a safe way. But for anyone, just to say briefly, for anyone who does need or want to taper off, that can also be done too rapidly, and a too rapid taper can be like cold turkeying. So again, this is where it's important to build your team however you can and get the right information. But yeah, time. I mean, this is something that also blows my mind, that the level of injury that I had. I couldn't talk to people. I couldn't deal with light. I couldn't deal with sound. I couldn't leave that. My heart was racing, just even having a shower. So the only factor that has changed between now and then is time. And the brain and the body intuitively knowing how to heal. And I just find that remarkable, and I hope that gives some hope to anyone that's scared or watching this and worried about their own or someone they care about situation. But I also think that there are things that can help and things that can inhibit the healing. So there's a continued risk of, if you take more medications, if I needed surgery tomorrow, would it cause a setback? Don't know how long that could be for. And I think there are things that can help, whether it's breath work. And I think there's a whole range of things. I think talking therapy, I have been told that I probably have PTSD now, but I've not had therapy for that. Red light therapy, lifestyle changes. So I would love to be back living in a warm climate, not necessarily too hot, but warm enough to get sunlight and be able to eat really good quality food, and all these things that add up and fill up your cup of true healing and balance and well-being. So I think there's a lot of things out there, and that does give me hope. Exercise is another one. We know that exercise can literally sort of regenerate neurological elements. But sadly, what happens with these situations is a lot of people lose everything, including the ability to work and finances. And a lot of these things that are really important for health and that can really help obviously cost money because they're not available in our standard medical systems. So it's a bit of a catch-22. It's good to know there's stuff out there, but in order to access them, you kind of, need to be in a certain position. So um, it does give me hope, but this is part of my rebuilding my life plan, means rebuilding my finances and a career to be able to then access these things that are out there.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, I think your message there was correct. It's just like, the body is such an amazing healing machine if we just give it the right care and the opportunity to heal itself. I think half the time we don't need all these pharmaceuticals and all these interventions basically that are meant to heal us but then cause endless problems down the road. Emma, I was going to ask you as a last question. I just wanted to know, finally, with your film and all the time and effort that you've put into sharing your journey and sharing your message and trying to I can't speak
New
today.
word. Let's
Trying to
add it to it.
raise trying to raise awareness around this dependency issue. What would be your optimum outcome when people see the film? And I'm really looking forward to seeing it myself. What channels will we be able to see it on? Where are you planning on showing it? And also, what would be your ideal outcome? What would you like to be able to achieve with the film?
Real world change, in the sense of enough public awareness where this doesn't keep happening to people, and validation and hope and justice for those that have already been harmed. And the same with the environmental aspect. So I think ultimately, in one sentence, being a catalyst for change across the board with the public health system, with individuals that have been harmed, and with the environmental concern too, the public health risk. And I think beyond that too, just being a story of hope, because we're living in such frustrating times in so many ways, and so many people are struggling, regardless if they've been prescribed or injured by a benzodiazepine or not. And I think it's really tough out there. And I think we need more stories of breaking through adversity and being able to build a healthy life, being able to construct a lifestyle that is actually truly in line with what we need as human beings and goes back to who we are as creatures on this planet, and to be part of a paradigm shift with the whole kind of societal mess and frameworks that I think we've got ourselves into. So yeah, there's the benzo issue, but it's also, I think, I want it to speak to a larger value system as well. In terms of where it'll be shown, so the rough timeline is to get the feature funding for this year so we can go into feature production. So we have a 10-minute proof of concept and various other forms of proof of concepts in 6 minutes, 3-minute versions. So to kind of use that and showcase that to attract our feature funding, and ideally go into post-production sort of middle of next year, with a view to then starting to release end of next year, so end of 2026. And my hope for that would be doing a mixture of community screenings, festival screenings, and then ultimately getting onto the big streaming platforms from that point.
Exciting! That's so cool. Well, I mean, thank you for all the work you've done around that, because I think it's amazing that, God, after such a hard journey, and spending so long trying to heal yourself, it's great that you've still got the energy. I don't know how, but
Yes.
great that you've still got the energy basically to try and help other people, because we need it. As you said, I think, our medical system and our value system is in tatters slightly, and we all need to work together basically to try and raise awareness around it, and also to help heal humanity, as dramatic as that sounds.
Yeah, it's
But
true
yeah,
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. And what I said there about just sort of just having energy with it. I mean, it's kind of true, and it's kind of, I keep saying, I'm not sure I've said it on screen before, but I always knew this journey would be kind of recovering from benzos would be the hardest thing, touch wood, that I've gone through. But making a film about it, or rather trying to get the film into full production, would be the second hardest thing. And it is, but at the same time, there is nothing else I would be doing. And whether I was broke or a billionaire, this would still be my priority, is getting this film out there. And I do think that it takes a lot of effort, and I think that's where community power can really strengthen, because when you are the underdog, it's the power of collective voice that can make all the difference. And I think that's kind of what's exciting about it as well, that sometimes individually we can feel powerless, especially if we've been harmed by the medical system and you've not been listened to for years. It's hard to have that hope and faith that you're going to be listened to after that.
Mm.
But I do genuinely believe that if enough of us come together and speak out and, you know, get something like this and other things like this off the ground, then we can create real shifts in the world.
Amen, sister. And I'll put all the links for anyone who's a bit concerned that they're on benzos or any other pharmaceutical and they could do with a bit of help, basically working out how they either titrate off of them, or just a little bit more information around what the potential damage it could cause them. I'll obviously put all the links to those that you've already mentioned, links to the organizations, sorry, that you've already mentioned. But for anyone that's kind of really enamored with the film that you're working on and would like to get involved in the campaign somehow, is there another link or a kind of email or anywhere else they can find you if they really want to throw some money your direction or get involved somehow?
Yeah, definitely. And there's multiple ways to get involved, whether that's monetary, whether it's advice, support, marketing. You know, there's a whole skill set that's required to get a documentary, a feature documentary off the ground and distributed in the right way. So yeah, we have the website at toxic.org. So that's toxick.org. And then on the social media platforms at Toxic Film. And to send an email directly, it's simply contact@toxic.org.
Great, Emma. Thank you so much for all the amazing work that you're doing, and yeah, the changes that I know that it's going to bring to our awareness around this issue. It's fantastic. Thank you for your energy and your drivenness behind it, and all your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. I really appreciate it, and all the work you're doing too. And thanks for sharing all of this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.